Good morning everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Going along our normal video route for this particular time of the month, we are still doing the food prep, planning, canning, all that sort of stuff from our 6-week grocery haul. So for anyone who this is the first video they've caught, we shop every 6 weeks. We live off-grid. There's 8 of us. The shopping every 6 weeks is about 4 hours away, so in the process of buying every 6 weeks we buy a lot of stuff in bulk, fresh produce, meat and all the rest of it, and then we have to process it so that it will last the full 6 weeks and potentially beyond, depending on what the product is. So when I first started doing these, everyone was always curious about how we made it last, and so we started doing these videos. I was doing them daily. Now I'm doing them every couple of days post grocery trip, and it seems to be working well. So what it means is that they're in parts. So this is part 4, I believe, and it's just going to be the next couple of days of food prep of all the food that we got in the grocery haul. So feel free to go back and check out the grocery haul if you're interested. And otherwise, come along and see what we got done with the bulk foods in the kitchen over the couple of days that this video covers. I think I'm going to have to figure out a better way to explain this front part again, because I've changed up the process and have lost a little bit of my idea of how to introduce it so that it makes sense to new viewers but doesn't detract from the video for regular viewers. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this is, as said, part 4, I think, of the 6-weekly food prep for the month of May in 2023. Now, anyone who has listened to me before knows that I have this rooster that comes and visits every time I stand here and chat, and he wasn't here, and I've just seen him walking up as I'm starting to do this, so no doubt you will hear him throughout the voiceover as well, because he is heading towards me right now because he obviously heard me chatting and wanted to check it out, what's going on. So I'll turn you around and quick look before I set it up for voiceover. Alrighty, so this first day of this food video is the day before my birthday. So I did a bunch of things that were in preparation for eating for the next day and things like that. I did a bunch of bread stuff this particular day because I do mostly sourdough, so it generally has to be prepared the day before I want to eat it. So I mixed up a couple of our focaccias because that's one of our favorite things to eat as a sort of a brunch meal. So I mixed up 2 lots of the focaccias. I do have a video on how I make these from start to finish. They're definitely a favorite bread, even with the extra hands-on time that's required to make them. It's worthwhile doing, and we really enjoy them. So, and they're very versatile for a range of things. So I thought that was a good thing to make now. It meant that I need minimal preparation for dinner type, for brunch and lunch type stuff, and I'd have this bread to use. The dough's slightly enriched. It's got some oil and some honey in it, and they're quite a high hydration dough. So I mix each batch in a separate bowl because I do coil folds throughout the afternoon, and then it's placed in the baking tray to prove overnight. So that's why it's done in separate bowls. High hydration, I do the coil folds for it, and I find it easier than trying to split the dough afterwards, though I could do that. I just find it easier to put them in separate bowls. I also mixed up a batch of pizza dough for dinner. Now, I'm guessing something must have been under one of the feet on my scales because the dough seemed awfully wet. It wasn't so wet that I couldn't use it, but it definitely seemed very wet compared to my normal pizza dough. So I'm guessing that the scales were, as I said, something was under the foot of the scales or something, and so the scales were measuring slightly wrong. So I can always add flour in the morning, and as I said, the dough wasn't so wet that I wasn't going to be able to handle it, so I just decided to use it as is. The pizza dough is fairly high hydration anyway. It's got a decent amount of olive oil in it, so as I said, I just went with it, knowing that it didn't look quite right, but that it was going to be usable. It got put into a container to proof overnight as well. These are Tupperware knockoffs by Kmart, and they're like a 4.5 litre square, and they work really well for proofing dough, especially if you're trying to judge your proof of the dough, because it's a straight-sided container instead of a round bowl. But it also has a lid, which is beneficial for me because we have rodents and things like that. The native bush rats like to eat any sort of food, fruit and veg, dough, anything that's left out. They don't chew through containers or wires or anything like that, not ours anyway. They're more possum-like than rat-like, so they tend to go for any sort of food products, and they seem to like the smell of my sourdough. So if there's no lid on it, or even if it's just got plastic wrap on it, they have chewed through plastic wrap before, so these containers work really well for that. But yes, the fact that they're straight-sided helps with judging the proof as well. I also made up some of my brioche dough. I use a very light brioche dough. It has minimal eggs and fat in it, but a little bit because it's still a brioche. I use this for my hamburger buns or sweet scrolls or anything that you'd use a brioche dough for. This is sort of my custom basic enriched dough that I use. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to make with it at this point, but cinnamon scrolls or the apple scrolls again or something like that was what was on my mind when I decided to make the brioche dough. You could do anything you want with it that's sweet, but so I thought at least I'd have it there and then I'd be able to do something with it. I did get myself cream cheese when I did the groceries, so cinnamon scrolls with cream cheese were sort of forefront there too. For dinner that night, the kids requested the pesto pasta. We did the sun-dried tomato pesto pasta instead of the basil pesto pasta this particular time. It's the same as the basil pesto pasta, realistically. It's just egg yolks, pesto, a bit of olive oil, some lemon juice, some cowboy candy. You add hot pasta to the egg mix, and that'll create that silky, creamy sauce. You can add some extra pasta water if needed. I don't appear to show it, but we served it with some of the pulled pork from the day before that we'd warmed up in the cast iron pan. So it was the sun-dried tomato pesto pasta with the pulled pork was what the kids had for dinner that night. I'd also cooked up a small rack of the ribs. They came in the monthly hamper that we get. It was only a very small rack, and they weren't very meaty ribs. So I did them in the smoker throughout the day. I mustn't have taken any footage of preparing them, but all I did was put my sweet pork rub over them with a bit of ghee, put them in the smoker, closed up, and then once it got to the point where they hit a certain temperature, I opened up the foil, put a bit of the apple butter barbecue, slathered it in the apple butter barbecue, and put them back in to get that sticky exterior and cook up. I just let Darryl have those. It wasn't a huge amount, so he had those with a bit of the kids' pesto pasta, and that was because I had also made myself a bit of a treat for dinner. I'd made myself actual mac and cheese with real cheese. So I mustn't have taken any footage of making the mac and cheese either, or I've missed it on the memory card when I've done it, but it's basic. I cooked up the cheese sauce in the Thermomix, cooked pasta, mixed it through, the two of them, put them in the cast iron Dutch oven, sprinkled it with seasoned breadcrumbs, and then baked it. And then I also cooked up some of that pulled pork and served myself some of that pulled pork with the mac and cheese for dinner. So we all had something different that night, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. The next morning, I pulled all my doughs out that I'd overnight proofed. Now, I had taken these inside to proof because it is getting down to the negative temperatures outside at the moment. It's still pretty chilly inside, though. It still generally gets down to somewhere between 5 degrees and 10 degrees Celsius by morning inside the house. We have a very small space, and so you can't stoke the fire real well for the whole night because you end up too hot to begin with. So we're still working on all of that, but realistically we just have enough bedding and wear the equivalent clothing that is required to find that 5 to 10 degrees of morning is fine, because it warms up pretty quick. So as soon as the sun goes up, the temperatures start climbing. So even though it might get down to -4 or so overnight, we're still having 20-degree days. We even had a 29-degree day the other day. So even though it's cold at night, it warms up. But anyway, so the dough was taken inside overnight and brought out in the morning. So the first thing I did was I shaped the pizza dough. Now, as I said, the scales must have been slightly off. This dough is very wet, but I just added more flour than I normally would to be able to handle it. I divided it into 8 pieces, which is approximately 250 grams per base, because that's how we like to make it. And then I used semolina in the bottom of the trays and over the dough to help reduce the sticking to each other and to the bottom and to the trays as it cold proof. So what I do is I split it into 8, I stick it in the trays, and then I put it in the fridge until about 30 minutes before I'm ready to cook it of an evening, and that's it done for the day. You can leave it more than a day too. Like I've put it in the fridge now, it can be up to sort of 72 hours before you have to use it. But we generally just make it the night before. But if I didn't get to it because I didn't get to make pizza that night for some reason, it wouldn't be ruined. It could be used the next day. So that's always good. I did the cinnamon scrolls next because they need a second proofing time. Now I mixed up some cinnamon, brown sugar and ghee in a bowl to use as the filling. I had made a double batch of the brioche dough, so I split it in half and rolled one of them out. Again, this was made with those scales last night and feels a little slack. It's a little bit moist, a little bit wet, a little bit, it's just not quite right, but again, it was workable if just with a little bit of extra flour. So I rolled it out into the rectangle and spread it with the sugar and cinnamon mix. I rolled it up into a log and then I cut it up. A lot of people use dental floss or fishing line or whatever to get the cuts nice and neat in the scroll type thing, but I find that a serrated bread knife is fine. You just don't take it all the way to the mat because you don't want to cut the mat. And I just use a dough cutter for that very last bit. It's not as neat as sometimes these look, but because this is a fairly high hydration sourdough anyway, it doesn't hold its shape fantastically well in that cutting process anyway, so I think even using fishing line it'd still flatten out a little bit. So once I cut them off, I put them in the tray. I did the first patch in my big cast iron pan, this enameled one that I've got. I really enjoy this. I really like this pan. It's a good pan for this sort of thing, but I only own one of them. So I did the second batch in a cake tin. That batch burnt quite a bit. The sugars on the bottom and the sides burnt quite a bit because I suppose the aluminium just doesn't have the insulating factor on the bottom and that for being cooked in a barbecue. There's open flames underneath. It got a little too hot on the actual surface of the tin, so I definitely need to get myself something else, cast iron or something to use for this. I suppose I could have done it in the long trays. I think I had them, I was using them for something else, I can't remember. Anyway, I ended up doing it in a cake tin because that's what I thought I'd give a try, and it didn't work real well, so I have to remember that for next time. I just put the rolls into those and put them aside to proof for a second time. It got to almost lunchtime and I really wanted to eat the focaccias, but I had proofed them in the cast iron trays, and the problem with that is that they stay pretty cold because the cast iron picks up heat or cold depending on what it is, and it was pretty chilly. So realistically that dough was nowhere near where I would normally have it to be cooking. It was definitely underproofed. With a focaccia you almost want it overproofed. You want it so that when you're dimpling it that you've got these great big bubbles popping up and things like that that really show that the dough is well and truly proofed. So this was definitely a little underproofed, but we were hungry and it was good enough, I felt, to cook. So I dimpled it, sprinkled it with flake salt, and I cooked it. You can see when I'm cutting it that it has these big void spaces. This is because it was underproofed, and then as it's hit a flush of a rise in the heat of the oven, so it's done a really quick proof in when the oven's heated up, and it's created the sort of cavities in it. The dimpling hasn't sort of stuck on the top of it either. It doesn't have the dimpling. It's gone this sort of a dome shape again because it was a little underproofed. Perfectly edible, perfectly tasty to how we normally eat it. It just wasn't perfect like we normally have it, but we ate it the same way anyway. We do grated raw garlic with some fresh rosemary in some olive oil with some balsamic vinegar and a bit of salt, and we just dip the bread into that. I think I also had some cheese with it. I think there was some salami floating around with the kids as well. I think even some of them had peanut butter on it because, you know, they're children. So we ate that for lunch. Once the cinnamon rolls had doubled again for their second proof, I put some little dollops of ghee on the top of the buns and stuck them in the oven, or the barbecue, whatever you want to refer to it as, to cook. Once they were baked, I mixed up some cream cheese lemon icing. I just did, you know, cream cheese, a bit of powdered sugar that I'd done in the Thermix. I just powdered some raw sugar, lemon juice and a little bit of ghee, and I put that on the round tray. Now, I did this because I really wanted it, but I should have just pulled out a couple of single buns and topped them with the cream cheese icing, to be honest, because there was no way I was going to eat the whole tray, and I didn't. I only ate 2 or 3 of them over the few days, and the rest went to the chickens, because once they had the cream cheese icing on them, no one else could eat them. So eyes were bigger than my belly, obviously, and I just, yeah, I wanted to make them because it was my birthday cake, basically, but it was a bit wasteful. So some of them got given to the chooks. So the chooks got some of my birthday cake as well, and they enjoyed it. Dinner that night was the pizza. So it was the long fermented sourdough base. We used plum barbecue as the sauce base because I'm actually completely out of pizza sauce on the shelf. We used some salami slices, tin corn, some people had pineapple, some had anchovies, some had mushrooms, and we all had some of the pulled pork as well as some of the marinated chicken thighs as the meat for the top of them. I had cheese on mine and a sprinkle of my bacon flavoured salt, and the others had some of the cashew cheese drizzled over it, and then Darryl had some of his mushroom salt on there as well. So the next morning we did a big scramble of eggs. So we did a whole lot of eggs scrambled up. I was making hollandaise as well, so I scrambled a whole lot of whites with a few yolks and kept some yolks aside for the hollandaise. We scrambled a bunch of eggs. We got plenty of eggs at the moment. And then I used some of the spinach that we got at the grocery shop. Now, we bought this box of spinach, and I think it was like $15 for 1.2 kilos or $12 for 1.2 kilos, whatever it was. It was very cheap, but I was really concerned about using the whole box. It has held really well in that second fridge. So for anyone who doesn't know, we have 2 fridges, but one of them has not working properly. It's only holding at around about the 8 degrees. It won't go any colder, so we can't store any meat or leftovers or things like that in it. But we've been putting all the excess fruit and veg and stuff, and it's holding things like spinach really well because it's not quite that cold. So that's kind of ideal. The cabbages, the spinach, the carrots, all that sort of stuff, the celery, all of that's holding really well in this fridge at about the 8 degrees. Obviously that's a bit more optimal than the 4 degrees. So the spinach is lasting super well, and I'm really glad that was bought. If there is some that does go bad before we get to eat it, the animals will love it. The ducks absolutely adore soft leaves like spinach, but regardless, we will eat as much as we can of it before that point. And I'm really happy with how it's held. I really expected it to not hold very well at all, and it's been really great. So we had all that to say. We had a big lot of scrambled eggs, and we're still trying to use up the spinach, so I put a whole lot of spinach in there. We had the leftover focaccia from the day before, so I toasted that off in the cast iron pan with a bit of ghee on it, and then we just had the scrambled eggs and spinach and stuff on top, and then I had made a hollandaise in the Thermomix. So we make the hollandaise. I made it with Nuttelex because that's what I've got at the moment, but you can use ghee. I think you can even make a coconut oil one, to be honest, and the egg yolks and stuff. And I really love the Thermomix for this purpose because you just throw everything in and turn it on. Hollandaise can be a little tricky when you do it on the stovetop. I've done it plenty of times, but you have to constantly whisk it on indirect heat, and it can be tricky. So being able to do it in the Thermomix means that it's sort of a treat food that we get to have more often. I suppose that's how I look at it. So we had that for breakfast. After that, we needed to do something with the pork. So we had that smoked pork roast in the last video, and the other half of the pork we'd put back in the fridge for the moment. So what we did then was we minced that half of the pork up. So I diced it up into size that was relevant for the meat grinder, and we have a Louvel meat grinder, which I absolutely adore and highly recommend. It is quite low power usage, and it works wonderfully. I used to use the KitchenAid, I use this now, and I really enjoy it. And I do have an affiliate link for it, so I'll put it in the comments just in case anyone's interested. But I highly recommend it, very much enjoy it. So I minced up all the pork, super simple to do. It's really easy to pull apart and put together as well, so it doesn't turn me off making small batches of things, because it can sometimes when you're mincing stuff you want to do a whole lot of mince at the same time because it's just so much effort. But because it's so easy to put together, pull apart and to run, it means that I can do small batches like this, which is only sort of 5 kilos of mince at a time, and not be worried about doing it. Like, I could have, with the KitchenAid, I probably would have pulled out another roast as well and cut it up and done it all at the same time because I've gone to all that effort. But with this one, nice and easy. Anyway, so I minced up all that pork. Now, because I minced up all that pork, we're going to use some of it over the next couple of days, or it'll have to be frozen or whatever else. So that's going to be part and parcel of our meals for the next few days though. I diced up and cooked potatoes, so I just cut some potatoes into nice small squares to put in the cast iron pan. I like to put a bit of lard in the bottom and put the potatoes on there. If you let them sit for a while before you try moving them, they will create a bit of a crispiness on them and they won't stick. So stick them in the pan. I like to use a lid over the pan so that they're sort of steaming initially, and towards the end I take the lid off and let them crisp back up as well. So I diced and cooked the potatoes. I also cooked some cabbage up. So again, cabbage is something that's holding really well in the fridge, and it's something that I like to buy because it does hold quite well. Even if it gets a little bit sort of limp, it's not too bad because you can cook it up and it still tastes wonderful. So I shredded up some cabbage to cook off as well to eat with breakfast. So I just shredded up, just sliced it all up, cooked it all off in a bit of lard with a bit of salt as well. And then I cooked some of the pork off. So all I did was I seasoned the pork with a bit of salt and pepper and a bit of sage, sort of like a breakfast sausage sort of a flavour, and cooked it all off in the pan. Then I added a little bit of flour to it and a little bit of gravy mix, the powdered gravy mix to it, put that through, and then I added kefir to it. So what we're having is basically a sausage gravy, but it's it's basically a sausage gravy, but I'm using a little bit of gravy powder because I like my gravy to be a little more gravy-like than white gravy. Like, rather than a white sauce, I want it to be a gravy. So I add a little bit of gravy powder to it, and I use kefir and water as the liquids for it. So I cooked up the pork in that gravy until it was done, and then we served it all up. So we had the cooked wilted cabbage, we had the fried potatoes and the sausage gravy over the top of it, and that was lunch for today. After that, I sliced up more cabbage. So we've still got that pork. So that's what I tend to do is I tend to use the same thing for a few days running once I prep it, so that and then freeze the rest of it, sort of thing. So for that dinner that night, we're going to have a stir fry. So I sliced up some more cabbage, again, just sliced it up, shredded it all up nice and fine, and good for a stir fry type meal. I sliced up some carrots into like a julienne style. I really need another julienne peeler, but at the same time I find that I'm pretty quick at cutting it like this, and there's less wastage if I do it this way. So sometimes I grab the julienne peeler. I don't have one at the moment, it got bent, the little teeth got bent, but I grabbed the julienne peeler, and then there's so much left at the end I'm going to chop it anyway. So anyway, I like my carrot to be long thin strips when I'm making it a stir fry, but I don't like it to be grated because then it gets soft. Fussy much? So anyway, I sliced up all the cabbage, sliced up all the carrots, and then I don't have much footage of anything else. So what I did was I cooked off the pork, cooked off all the veggies. I used a bit of a teriyaki sort of a sauce. It was a bit of mirin, bit of oyster sauce, bit of soy sauce, sort of a sweet salty sauce that I cooked all the veggies and everything in, and then we fried off some eggs because I didn't use noodles or rice or anything like that. It's straight cabbage, carrot and pork because we had plenty of those to use. So I cooked all that off and then put it in a plate and put a couple of fried eggs over the top, and that was dinner for everyone that night. So that was part 4, the next couple of days. That covered my birthday, so cinnamon scrolls for birthday cake and things like that. We still have a couple more to go, intermix between everything else. I still have plans for a couple of things to get done too. I have to do a new batch of all my seasoned salt. So I've got a rosemary citrus salt, a bacon salt and a mushroom salt that I need to refill the jars of. So I really wanted to do that on camera so that I could show you guys those, because they just make a dish sometimes. So I'm going to do those, and I've really got to make a new batch of cowboy candy, some caramelized onion jam, and yet another month has gone by and I haven't made any soap. So but we'll see how we go. I've got a real lot of typing work at the moment. It's end of financial year and I work for financial advisors, so I've got a real lot of typing work to get done at the moment. It's quite a large scope of work that I've got in amongst everything else, and we're still working on all the gardens. So I'll have another chat with you guys tomorrow or at some point about the decisions we've made with the garden and things like that, and where we're going, how we're moving forward with that. So all that work's going on. I've been doing a bunch of research on all different things to do with raised beds and wicking beds and stuff, because it's not something I've done. I've only done the in-ground beds. So I'm doing a bunch of research with all of that as well. And I'm still working on the mugs and all that as too. It's just, there's been a lot going on at the moment. So but this was part 4 of the food at least done, and then I've got part 5. I actually have the notes for part 5 here too, so I might get the voiceover done for those today as well, maybe, so that's all set up, and then yeah, we'll keep on going. So it'll be interesting to see how many parts it ends up over the 6 weeks, because it's sort of dragging it out over the 6 weeks rather than just being done day by day post the grocery haul, which I think is beneficial for me and you guys, so we will see. The other thing is that Temu reached out to me to see if I wanted to do a video about their products. So they gave me money to spend in the store and said that I just have to do a video about what I get. So I had people mention in the comments about things like I wanted to get a couple more silicone spatulas, and they said you should check out Temu, and I hadn't, but they sent me this thing, so I had a look, and they have all that sort of stuff. So they gave me money to spend in the store, and I got a whole bunch of silicone spatulas and some wooden utensils to use with my cast iron and miscellaneous bits and pieces. So when that parcel arrives as well, I'll do a video showing you all the stuff I got from there, and I think they give me some codes to give you guys as well, so that will be really cool. I'll get some more kitchen stuff, and I think it was a bit of garden stuff and some stuff for the kids and a whole range of stuff, so I'll share that as well. So I will see you on the next video. Thanks guys.